So this is Genesis 5, verses 18 through 24. And Jared lived 162 years and brought forth Enoch. And after he brought forth Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years and brought forth Methuselah. And after he brought forth Methuselah, Enoch walked with Elohim 300 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with Elohim, then he was no more, for Elohim took him. So this is understood as a translation. Okay, this is one of the first translations of Scripture, or the first translation in Scripture recorded, where Enoch was transcended from human flesh to spirit. Okay, the other apocryphal writings talk about how he was taken back to the Garden of Eden to guard and keep it. Okay, now we're going to look at 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 6 through 12. 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 6 through 12. It reads as follows. Eliyahu said to him, "Please remain here," speaking to his servant Elisha. "For Yah has sent me on to the Jordan." And he said, "As Yah lives, and as your being lives, I do not leave you." This is what Elisha responded. And the two of them went on. And 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood facing them at a distance, while the two of them stood by the Jordan. And Eliyahu took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water, and it was divided this way and that, so that the two of them passed over on dry ground. And it came to be, when they had passed over, that Eliyahu said to Elisha, "Ask what I am to do for you before I am taken away from you." And Elisha said, "Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." And he said, "You have made it hard to ask, yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it is yours, but if not, it is not." So he had to have the spiritual clarity and perception to perceive Eliyahu taken from him. And it came to be, as they continued on and spoke, that see, a chariot of fire with horses of fire, which separated the two of them. And Eliyahu went up by a whirlwind into the heavens. And Elisha saw it, and he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen." And he saw him no more. Then he took hold of his garments and tore them into two pieces. And he took up the mantle of Eliyahu that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. So there we have Eliyahu transcending and going into heaven. Now we're going to look at Matthew 26, verses 62 through 64. Matthew 26, 62 and through 64, which reads as follows. And the high priest, this is when Yahushua is before the Sanhedrin, the Beit Din, the house of judgment, based on his teachings, and they're wanting to rid him from Israel. The high priest stood up and said to him, "Have you no answer to make? What do these witness against you?" But Yahushua remained silent. So the high priest said to him, "I put you to oath by the living Elohim that you say to us if you are the Messiah, the son of Elohim." Yahushua said to him, "You have said it. Besides, I say to you, from now on you shall see the son of Adam sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of the heaven." So here we see him saying that he will be sitting on the throne, where he will be taken away to. Okay, how do we know this happened? Let's read the book of Acts chapter 1, verses 6 through 11. It reads as follows. So when they had come together, they asked him, this is his disciples, now the 11 disciples minus Yehudah or Judas, who had betrayed him, "Master, would you at this time restore the reign to Israel, the kingdom back to Israel?" And he said to them, "It is not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the set-apart Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Yehudah and Shamaron, Samaria, and to the end of the earth." And having said this, while they were looking up, he was taken up, and a cloud hid him from their sight. And as they were gazing into the heavens as he went up, see, two men stood by them dressed in white, who also said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up into the heaven? This same Yahushua, who was taken up from you into the heaven, shall come in the same way as you saw him go into the heaven." Then they went back to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, which is near Jerusalem, a Shabbat day's journey. Okay, so here we have him being transcended into heaven. we got the meat of these passages done. We're going to now go to the 6th verse of Revelation, which talks about, let's go here. The woman fled into the wilderness that was prepared for her, okay, to a place that was prepared for her to be nourished 1,260 days. And we know this 1,260 days is also akin to chapter 11, when these 2 witnesses shall prophesy as well. So they will be guarded during this time as well. So we're going to look at, we just read Hosea 2, where the woman will be lured into the wilderness where she will be comforted. That's Hosea 2. We're also going to look at Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 33 through 38. Ezekiel 20, 33 through 38. It reads as follows. As I live, declares the Master Yah, do not I, with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out rain over you. And I shall bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the lands where you are scattered with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm and with wrath poured out. And I shall bring you into the wilderness of the peoples and shall enter into judgment with you face to face there. As I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Mizraim, so I shall enter into judgment with you, declares the Master Yah. And I shall make you pass under the rod and shall bring you into the bond of the covenant and purge the rebels from among you and those who transgressed against me. From the land where they sojourn, I'll bring them out, but they shall not come into the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am Yah. So this is a preparation. Just like when they first left Mizraim to go into the wilderness where they got purged and cleansed and purified so that they may inherit that land, the same thing is going to happen now, okay? According to what this has written in it. Let's look at Zekaryah 12, verses 6 through 9. Zekaryah 12, verses 6 through 9. It reads as follows. Keep in mind protection. In that day, the leaders of Yehudah, I shall make the leaders of Yehudah like a fire pot among trees and like a torch of fire in the sheaves. And they shall consume all the peoples all around and on the right and on the left. And Jerusalem shall again dwell in her own place in Jerusalem. The people Jerusalem shall dwell in the land Jerusalem. And Yah shall save the tents of Yehudah first, so that the comeliness of the house of David and the comeliness of the inhabitants of Jerusalem would not become greater than that of Yehudah. In that day Yah shall shield the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the feeble among them in that day shall be like David, and the house of David like Elohim, like the messenger of Yah before them. And it shall be in that day that I seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem, and I shall pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of favor and prayers. And they shall look on me whom they pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and they shall be in bitterness over him as bitterness over the firstborn son. All right, so this is now dealing with the coming out into the wilderness and how Yah will protect them during this time and shield them from this dragon that is hot in pursuit. So as we go back to the 12th verse, the 7th verse, through the 11th now, this war in heaven, when Satan got thrown down. Okay, let's look at this war in heaven, how Satan gets thrown down. We're going to go to the book of Yehudah, chapter 9. It reads as follows. Verse 9. It says, Mikah, the chief messenger, in contending with the devil, when he disputed about the body of Moshe, presumed not to bring against him a blasphemous accusation, but said, Yah rebuke you. So here is a contention of Yah's angels with Satan. This goes back to verse 4 when he was thrown out of the heaven. Okay, so this is now focusing on this war that is fought between them. We're going to now look at Isaiah 14 verse 3 to 24, and this is pretty much the full reality of it. Isaiah really captures the essence of who this deceiver is, who this being is, and how he has manifested himself in flesh. So a lot of times we look at this in spirit. Yes, there is a spiritual reality to it, but the nature of spirit is that it has to have a host. And so here we have the host revealed, okay? And this is a mystery that has to be understood. This is Isaiah 14 verses 3 through 24. It shall be in the day Yah gives you rest from your sorrow and from your trouble and the hard service in which you were made to serve, that you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of Babel, and say, how the oppressor has ceased. Now keep in mind, this is the sovereign of Babel, okay, the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has ceased, the gold gatherer ceased. Yah has broken the staff of the wrong, the scepter of the rulers, okay, so they're connected with people. He who struck the people in wrath with ceaseless blows, he who ruled the nations in displeasure, is persecuted and no one restrains. And we revealed how Babel, Mystery Babel today, is none other than the Vatican, with their two arms of England, the economic branch, and the District of Columbia, the United States, as the military/political branch, and the Vatican itself being the actual, what's the word I'm looking for? The religious branch. All the earth is at rest and at peace, and they shall break forth into singing. Even the cypress trees rejoice over you, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were cut down, no woodcutter has come up against us. Sheol from beneath is excited about you, to meet you at your coming. It stirs up the dead for you. All the chief ones of the earth, it has raised up from the thrones all the sovereigns of the nations. All of them respond and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? Have you become like us? Your arrogance has been brought down to Sheol, and the sound of your string instruments, the maggot is spread over you, under you, and maggots and worms cover you. How you have fallen from the heaven, O Hillel, O Lucifer, son of the morning. You have been cut down to the ground, you who laid low the nations. For you have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens. Let me raise my throne above the stars of El. Let me raise my throne above the stars of El, and let me sit in the mount of appointment on the sides of the north. Let me go up above the heights of the clouds. Let me be like the Most High. But you are brought down to the pit. You are to the sides of Sheol, but you are brought down to Sheol, to the sides of the pit. Those who see you stare at you and ponder over you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook rains, who made the world as a wilderness and destroyed its cities, who would not open the house of his prisoners? All the sovereigns of the nations, all of them were laid in esteem, everyone in his own house. But you have been thrown from your burial site like an abominable branch, like the garment of those who are killed, thrust through with the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a trampled corpse. You are not joined with them in the burial place. You have destroyed your land and killed your people. Let the seed of evildoers never be mentioned. Prepare his children for slaughter because of the crookedness of their fathers, lest they rise up and possess the land and fill the face of the world with cities. And I shall rise up against them, declares Yah of hosts, and shall cut off from Babel the name and remnant and offspring and descendant, declares Yah. And I shall make it a possession for the porcupine and marshes of muddy water, and shall sweep it with the broom of destruction, declares Yah of hosts. Yah of hosts has sworn, saying, truly as I have planned, so it shall be, and as I have purposed, so it stands. Now, one of the oral traditions has it, the reason his pride was so pompous was because when Yah made Adam, he also had commanded his host of angels, his messengers, to bow before Adam. But when Hillel saw this being of flesh and blood, he refused to, because as the most beautiful covering cherub, he was like, I'm not bowing to this flesh and blood being. I'm a being of fire. Okay, I'm much more powerful than this piece of flesh and blood. But he refused to understand the mystery of the image of Yah in Adam, who was to be his representative on earth. Okay, and this is where he refused to understand that he was to be at Adam's service, but instead he chose to rebel and to wage war against him and his descendants and his offspring. Let's look at John 12 and 31. John, the witness of John, chapter 12, verse 31. It reads as follows. Now was the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of the world, of this world, shall be cast out. So now that Yahushua has gained victory over this, he's truly ineffective. His plots and his schemes are ineffective if we understand them, and we understand that Yahushua has claimed victory over the works of Satan, the devil, which are sin and death. Deception, lies, murder, sin, and death. Okay. Let's go to Luke chapter 10 and verse 18. close out this portion of scripture of verses 7 through 11. This is Luke 10, verse 18. And he said to them, I saw Satan falling out of the heaven as lightning. So this is what Isaiah 14 is describing. This is what Luke 12 is also describing, because now he's being prepared for the pit or the lake of fire. Okay, here we go. Verse 12 of Revelation talks about the devil is now come down to earth, and he has great wrath, knowing that his time is little. Well, let's look at what is going on, what this devil is now all about. This is the book of Job, chapter 1. We're going to read verse 6 and 7. And the day came to be that the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Yah, and Satan also came among them. And Yah said to them, from where did you come? And Satan answered Yah and said, from diligently searching in the earth and from walking up and down in it. So this is what he's all about. He's searching for people to deceive, to devour, to destroy. How do we know that? Let's look at 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. It says, be sober, watch, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. This is his whole MO. He's seeking someone to devour. Now we read the 13th verse of Revelation. The dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, and he persecuted the male child, the woman who gave birth with the child. So this is what has been going on between Israel, the true Israelites, and also the dragon and the host in flesh who has persecuted Israel throughout time. Okay, we're going to go to Exodus 1. We're going to look at this in several categories. This is Exodus verse 1 and how he has persecuted the woman who was to give birth. Literally. 8 through 16. After Israel got into the land, and let's say 230 years had passed, now Israel had faced a new sovereign or new pharaoh in Egypt. And this is what happens. Then a new sovereign arose over Mitzrayim who did not know Yosef. And he said to his people, see, the people of the children of Israel are more and stronger than we. Come, let us act wisely toward them, lest they increase, and it shall be when fighting befalls us, that they shall join our enemies and fight against us, and shall go up out of the land, because they had profited off of them, okay? So they set slave masters over them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh supply cities, Pithom and Ramesses. So they did not build the pyramids, they built supply cities. But the more they afflicted them, the more they increased and grew, and they were in dread of the children of Israel. And the Mitzrites made the children of Israel serve with harshness. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all kinds of work in the field. All their work which they had made them do was with harshness. Then the sovereign of Mitzrayim spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other was Puah. And he said, when you deliver the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stools, if it is a son, then you shall put him to death. But if it is a daughter, then she shall live. And this is the reason for the last plague of Egypt in the Exodus, when they threw them into, or they murdered all the firstborn, because that's exactly what the Egyptians had done to Israel. Now we're going to go back to a book called Jasher, which is a little more in-depth detail of what took place from the time of creation to the conquest of the land under Joshua. This is chapter 8, verses 1 through 13. This is dealing with Abraham now, before he was born in the land of Ur of Chaldea. And it was in the night that Abram was born, that all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod, king of Babel, and his magicians came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. And it came to pass that all the wise men and magicians went out from the house of Terah. They lifted up their eyes toward heaven that night to look to the stars, and they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens, and he swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And all the wise men of the king and all his magicians were astonished. And the wise men understood this matter, and they knew its import. And they said to each man to his neighbor, this only betokens the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever. And he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands. And all the wise men and all the magicians went home that night. And in the morning all these wise men and magicians rose up early and assembled in the appointed house. And they spoke and said to each man to his neighbor, Behold, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king, Nimrod. It has not been made known to him. And should this thing become known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, Why have you concealed this matter from me? And then we shall all suffer death. Therefore now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw, and the interpretation thereof, and we shall then remain clear. And they did so. And they all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground, and they said, May the king live, may the king live. We heard that a son was born to Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of your host. And we last night came to his house, and we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night. And when your servants went out from the house of Terah to go to our respective homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east. And the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the 4 sides of the heaven. And your servants were astonished at the sight which we saw, and were greatly terrified. And we made our judgment upon the sight, and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that this thing applies to the child that is born to Terah, who will grow up and multiply greatly and become powerful, and kill all the kings of the earth and inherit all their lands, he and his seed forever. And now our Lord and the King, behold, we have truly acquainted you with what we have seen concerning this child, concerning his being established. If it seems good to the king to give his father value for this child, we will slay him before he shall grow up and increase in the land, and his evil increase against us, that we and our children perish through his evil. So what they called evil was actually what Yah had planned, which is righteous, which is good, which is true. But what they were doing was deceiving the world with their mysteries, okay? The Babylonian mysteries, from where all these mystery religions come from today, okay? Continuing on. Verse 14, and the king heard their words, and they seemed good in his eyes, and he sent and called for Terah, and Terah came before the king. And the king said to Terah, I have been told that a son was last night born to you, and after this manner was observed in the heavens at his birth. And now therefore give me the child, that we may slay him before his evil springs up against us, and I will give you for his value your house full of silver and gold. So we can see the attack of the dragon against this woman has been taking place from time immemorial. This even goes back to Abel and Cain, or Abel and Cain, when Abel was the promised seed who was actually murdered by his brother because he did what was right in Yah's eyes. He accepted the offering that Abel gave because Abel was aware and instructed by Adam, his father, while Cain was rebellious and refused to accept the instruction and did what was right in his own eyes and had his offering rejected, and that envy and that pride welled up in him, and he carried out the plans of his master, who is Lucifer. We're going to now look at a few more verses, or one more verses related to this chapter, verse 13 I mean, and we're going to look at Matthew 2. We're going to look at the first 13 verses. It reads as follows.